Good evening, everybody. Ross here at Teacher Toolkit. Thank you for joining me. You'll have signed up through the Eventbrite page. You're here to learn more about what you can see on the screen, improving well-being without guessing, something I'm very passionate about. Now, I've been doing a bit of work with Welby for a number of months now. And just to be clear, this session is exclusively for school, college and mat leaders, but you're all welcome. So it'd be nice to see people taking part, and people that have the Eventbrite link have already been sent a pre-survey link. Just to remind you, this is being streamed live to my YouTube, Twitter and Facebook page, and to take part and to have your comments posed, and I'll pose them on your behalf, you need to be logged in. I can already see a few people saying hello, so let me know where you're watching from in the chat box. What's the weather like, etc. And I'll give your town a shout out. And then I'll display your comment on the screen, and we'll post some questions to Mark Solomon from Welby. I guess just to kind of set the scene, if you ask any school leader if they care about staff well-being, you'll hear a resounding yes, of course they do. Go one step further and ask them what they're doing, and it's either an anonymous survey, it's sausage rolls for a staff well-being party or whatever. And that's pretty much it. There'll be one or two other things. They may have a well-being policy, they may have a well-being leader, and they may, at a push, have a dedicated well-being budget for their staff. But I'd argue it's not enough. And I suppose about 10 years ago, you would struggle to find much research about teacher well-being and its links to outcomes and staff retention, but now it's in abundance. And I think, 10 years for us all into kind of algorithms and analytics and a social media world where we've got technology all around us, there's no excuse for us to start to use software to gather data about the workforce in our schools and colleges, so that if I make a decision in terms of a policy procedure, what impact does it have later on in terms of staff well-being, recruitment, retention, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to bring Mark in the moment. I'm going to just take these slides off. Just a reminder again, StreamYard, streaming live. I can see a few comments, so I'll just put one or two on just as a little demo. So thank you, David, for taking part. David, it's sunny with thunderstorms. I believe there was a bit of hailstone today in parts of the south. So we're not quite in the summer, but thank you, David, for joining me. We've got Ruth here from Cumbria, so a beautiful part of the world. So welcome, Ruth. Thank you for joining us. And over in Bristol, rainy sunshine. So thank you, Eve, for joining. So that's how it's going to work. I'm going to bring Mark in just to say hello. What we're going to do is just briefly talk about what Welby is. And then there's a good number of you that have taken a survey just before. So in fact, just before I bring Mark in, let me just put this in front of you. So we've got 130 people signed up, which is pretty good considering this time of the academic year. We know teaching is always exhausting. We also know that we're conscious we're doing a well-being event in the evening, but we know this is when we can grab you at a suitable time as well as other times in the working day. So this is when we decided. So not ideal, but we hope we've got you at the right time. And people from countries all over the world. Obviously, we're streaming this in England. So if we just zoom in here, you can just see where people are based. There is a QR code there. So if you grab your phone, if you've got a double device to hand, if you scan this QR code, and I will circulate this if you can't do it now, but that will take you to a whole stack of comments, anonymous comments from you or people that took part in the survey. And we're going to work through some of these and you can get a sense. So we've kind of created a pretend teacher toolkit school. And Mark, when he comes in, is going to talk about Welby and then talk through the data that you've submitted and how we can use this data to really nail down on the specifics of staff well-being. So if I just pause on this slide, I'm going to bring Mark in here to say hello. Good evening, Mark.
Evening, Ross. Evening, everybody. Thanks very much for joining us. As Ross says, we certainly don't do any of our marketing or any of our things outside normal working hours for the exact reason we want to give people the time to do things for themselves, although we know how many people actually carry on working into those areas. But with discussions with Ross, we felt we wanted to actually get out and help more people. So thank you so much for joining us. We know how precious your time is, and I'm looking forward to spending the next 55 minutes with you.
Mark, so let's start off with the first question. What is Welby, and give us a synopsis. What are the benefits, and why should teachers, schools, and colleges use the tool?
Yeah, so Welby is an online platform that came out of actually working with 17 schools in around Belfast in Northern Ireland, with one of them using a survey, and I kind of volunteered. So it was a kind of accidental creation of a business. I wasn't looking to necessarily do this, having spent the last 7 or 8 years working with hundreds of schools and thousands of leaders on culture and leadership development. But it became clear one school had been tracking their staff wellbeing since 2010, and the other schools thought that was quite exciting. And so when I started doing this and getting into it, I realized that one of the big challenges for schools, apart from having little time and expertise, is how to systemize things rather than kind of being a bit ad hoc. And we all know in life as well, so not just in schools, but if we ever want to achieve anything, then having clear goals, but also knowing where you're starting from is absolutely key. We do it for our students. We wouldn't dream of them sitting exams without knowing where they are. We track progress robustly. And so kind of thinking, well, why wouldn't we do the same sort of thing for staff wellbeing? And I'm in my second career, so just to show you, I spent 23 years in retail banking through to 2009. It's done long ago, I've forgotten. And then I've kind of since then come into a second career, originally on character education and working with the vice chair of the Olympic Association in 2012 bid where we brought Olympians into schools, which was hence my connection. Though I've always had a passion because my mum was a teacher, and I've been.
Yes, I was going to just ask my next question. What drives you to do all this? So we'll all know that teachers work hard, and there's one or two myths out there that we're lazy and we have loads of holidays and all those types of things. But what motivates you to help teachers and schools with their well-being?
Well, clearly, part of it is about young people and giving them the start that I've been lucky enough to have, and not everybody gets, and supporting that. But I guess growing up with a mum, with getting used to books on the dining room table, and actually considering the teaching profession, but I guess either not deliberately, but either sensibly. I guess might look back now. I went a different direction, but then kind of started supporting as a parent governor in both the primary and secondary sectors where my children went, but then stayed on well after. Because actually it wasn't about parent governing. I kind of got the bug, and really now being someone who really focuses in on thinking, well, I did a lot of research over the last 12 years and really started with that focus everybody does on young people, and slowly began to realize that actually if we want to get the real benefits, then there's only one place that any school should focus first if they want the best for their young people, and that's on helping their staff. Because if your staff aren't able to do their best work, then really you're never going to do the best for young people. And that comes from the senior leaders all the way down. They need to have the capacity and the health and the motivation to be able to do their best work every day. And sadly, I think at the moment, if we're going to wait for government to sort things out, or else we've got a long wait. So how can we help schools help themselves? Is where we're at. So although we don't do it for you, I guess what we've tried to build is something that more quickly enables you to focus on those right areas, build well-being into the culture. So it isn't the sausage rolls that you talked about, or the well-being day, or the cake, because the big challenge of that is once you've eaten that, when you go to work the next Monday, it's kind of nothing's changed. So really,
okay. So I guess for the kind of context of people watching, so reminder, please leave comments on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter, and I'll display your comments like this. So here's an example. Hello, Abby. Nice to hear that it's sunny in South Wales. So that kind of thing, we'll pose your comments, but we're going to start off by showing you the best bits. So for context, for one or two people that might be watching live who weren't through the Eventbrite ticket list, what we've done before is we shared a pre-survey, a kind of methodology inside Welby to gather data, which is what a school or college leader would do beforehand, So in this context, we've gathered the views of, Mark will go into the specific numbers, but a number of people that have participated in the survey. And we've created a pretend teacher toolkit school. And we're going to go through some of the comments and show you what the software can do in terms of the things that Mark's talked about. I guess once we've done the show and tell, we're going to go deeper into the kind of mechanics and how you can get started. And if you hang on to the very end, my partnership with Mark in terms of, teacher toolkit, if your school's interested, and I work with lots of companies like this in my kind of life as a blogger, Mark's resources are very good value for money. So we've managed to secure you a nice little discount for your school leader if you're interested. And there's bits of software you can try for free. And just as an ad hoc idea, before we get started, Mark and I have thought about maybe taking this conversation a little bit further after today in terms of the people already connected. Maybe we could conduct a small scale research project or something like that, where we can look at the data, ask you to fill in some comments, and then show you what you can do with the software, a bit like a kind of a continuation of this, so that you can learn the software a bit more and then maybe take it back into your school. But we'll come back to that as we go through. So, Mark, I'll put your screen up and I'll just interject with the odd question. But if you just start with, what we can see, what the information is telling us, and just give the kind of context of the survey for people watching, that'll be helpful. Over to you.
No, I will. So I'll start by just talking about, obviously, the people who have taken it. So we only launched it, I think, yesterday morning, so quite short and sharp. 52 people took it, of which nearly 30 were senior leaders, 20 were teachers, nearly 10 middle leaders, and a couple of support staff. And that has given a slightly unbalanced approach compared to a typical school. And that's because often support staff score more highly. And as a result, when you start looking at this and you can see the scores, and I'll come on to them, you can see that the scores generally are low. And we can see this because what we've got on screen is we're going to look at the 6 scores rather than the additional questions at the moment, and I can't count the 7 scores rather than the additional questions. And these are scores against the management standards. So they're health and safety executives management standards. So the survey that you all took today is an evidence-built survey from a government body. It's independently evaluated for its psychometric qualities, and it is recognised in the new DfE staff wellbeing charter as a tool that can be used, go that way a bit, for meeting commitment 11 of the charter in terms of not just measuring but tracking progress, which we'll come on to a bit later. For those of you not familiar with the management standards, just to give you a very quick and brief, there are 6 of them, although there's 7 scores, and that's because manager support and peer support are split out. So just running through those, it's around demands that you can see here, which is really things that are placing those demands on you. So workload, deadlines, can be behaviour of children in school. So anything that's really causing those pressure and stress points. We've got control up here, which is the amount of autonomy you've got, the degree to which you feel you can shape your work, have influence over what and how you do things, and flexible working. You've got support, which is really the support you feel you get from managers, peers, colleagues. There's relationships. So this isn't just about how people get on, because obviously inevitably in any large organization or even small organization for smaller schools, people don't always get on perfectly all the time. People will fall out, but it's when this becomes unhealthy. So whether there's bullying, harassment, things that are talked about in the Ofsted framework around understanding the pressures our staff are under, and particularly making sure bullying and harassment doesn't take place. We've got role, which is the degree to which people feel they understand what's expected of them, how their role fits with their department or phase or function, and also with the vision of the school or MAT or college kind of moving forward. And then finally, we've got change, and that's how well change is managed, big and small, the degree to which people feel consulted, and whether they get the opportunity to question leaders. And so the survey you took today, various questions go into these standards, and it allows us to bring out these scores out of 5, with 5 being better, and as you move down being worse. But the challenge with doing a survey that's just score based, just with Likert scale, is that all answers or scores are not equal. So what you've also got here, you can just about probably see them at the bottom. They look quite big on my big screen, but here you've got a school decile, which basically compares the score of the school, so at Teacher Toolkit School, to other schools that have taken the survey with us. And this is saying in terms of control, we're in the 5th decile, which effectively puts us in the top 50%, so between 40, just over 40 and 50%. And then, as you can see, we drop immediately in this one into the 9th decile. So we're in the bottom 20%. And then for the rest of the scores, we're in the bottom 10%. That means we're all feeling the stress, the pressure, more than staff on average are, significantly more than staff on average are in other schools out there. Part of that, though, is the makeup of the data, because, as I said, in many schools, we'll probably get a much greater split with 30-40% of people being support staff, and they will give higher scores, and that would have brought the balance up a little bit. It doesn't matter. We can still kind of look at these and look at the actions, and it gives us actually a lot of things that we can look and talk about. And the 2nd decile you can see is the health and safety executive's own decile. That's more cross sector, so it gives you an idea. But what you can see here is that in all of these areas, really, we're in the 8th, 9th, or 10th decile when we compare performance to other sectors. And obviously that says and really underpins some of the comments that we received in the survey and some of the research out there about this being a very high stress environment that we're working in, the workload issues and pressures, the lack of kind of appreciation and support.
Mark, can I just interject with my first thought, and again remind people watching, pose your question. I'll see it on the chat box. I'll put it on the screen for Mark to respond. So we've got 52 people that responded, so about half of the audience that signed up for the event.
Yep.
Yes, context, it's a pretend Teacher Toolkit School. So how much of the data, context is key. I guess it's a sample rather than anything reliable or robust that we can use. But, could you explain how much of this is useful, or because it's a pretend school, is it just something we can't necessarily?
No, we still get used, because when we look at recommended actions, it will still generate actions for those scores. So we'll go into them, and I've pulled out 3 or 4 actions we can just talk about. So hopefully people can go away with some practical things, as well as seeing how the report helps. I mean, one of the things in terms of our build, and I guess why we get such good feedback, and also why, just giving a bit of bragging rights and a bit of plug, why we just won the Education Resources Award 2022 for Best Wellbeing Solution, is, I guess, because not only did it come out of schools, but we built most of this with feedback and a guidance panel of schools. And as well as being very reasonably priced, not into sales or anything there, but we offer a full money back guarantee, which nobody's ever claimed on as well. So we do genuinely get really good feedback. But I think that's because we've tried to build something that schools want rather than what we think they want. And
I've got a hard question for you, Mark. So you're an award-winning organisation, and you give people their money back if they don't like it, which is a win. Here's a comment in the survey. Staff wellbeing is taken more seriously by our MAT, our Multi-Academy Trust, than our school. However, I don't think the school leaders see the links between wellbeing and staff retention.
I think that's probably common. I think probably at an intuitive level, many people probably do, but at a practical level, or being able to find time to do anything about it, I think is probably true. I think the evidence now is pretty compelling, and I can share, we've got a document with all the evidence. So if people want to see the evidence to help convince people, if they're not convinced already, there was a Teacher Development Trust paper last year that looked at 30 different reports that have gone out there that actually is now starting to prove a causal link, or it's still tentative in education, a causal link between teacher self-reported wellbeing and student outcomes. There's other reports, though, particularly some in education, but particularly in the health sector, so as business, that not only look at attainment or outcomes in terms of performance, but also in terms of financial performance as well, in terms of staff retention, in terms of reduction in supply cover, and absences. So I think anybody that now is not kind of realizing this causal link between helping staff and what impact it's going to have, particularly for those of you, I don't know if like me, I'm a fan of Laura
behind is what you're trying to say. They're getting left behind and wasting.
Yeah, getting left behind. But I'm a fan of Laura McInerney, and she's did a long tweet last week saying how actually, if we think we've had it bad now with the changes in birth rates and what's coming over the next few years, it's only going to get worse. So hanging on to your staff and recruiting good staff is absolutely key. And just intuitively, I said to you earlier, my vision and why I do this is I've got this little head picture of all staff and support staff, teachers, leaders, all skipping into school every morning, feeling great about doing the job that they all generally love to do if only the other things didn't get in the way.
Yes.
I'm trying to play a part in how can we help systematically create and build well-being into the culture.
So can we get into the data, Mark? And
yeah, of course we can.
So let's maybe explain why are we in the 5th school decile for control, for example?
So basically what that does is, so those questions are in control, which from memory are 6 questions. The average of those scores for all staff in this particular organisation are measured against the benchmarks that have been created by other organisations that have taken it, and basically the particular score for this school is between the 40th and 50th decile, and therefore it's in the 5th decile, which means top 50%, if you like. So there are still 50% of schools that have scored staff in 50% of schools have scored lower than this school in control. So as a group, we're about average in terms of how we feel. And the other thing that's important, we'll come into this with filters, but we've made a deliberate stance not to. We've got by loads of data, enough data to have different benchmarks for teachers and senior leaders and middle leaders. The challenge, particularly for middle and teachers who tend to be our lowest scorers, if we actually benchmark those, we'd start as a profession saying, oh, well, I'm okay because my teachers aren't as bad as somebody else's teachers. But the simple fact is, when you compare teachers and middle leaders in particular to other staff, they are generally much lower scoring. And we don't want to create an environment where teachers have kind of said, well, you're no worse than anyone else in terms of the teaching, but actually there's a real opportunity to get you up. In terms of senior leaders, we did one interesting observation because we did a massive survey of 8,000 people last year outside schools. And in that survey, across all sectors and phases, senior leaders actually gave the lowest scores. And I'm quite encouraged to see, again, quite low senior leader scores. One of the really interesting things, when we do the survey with schools, senior leaders tend to have higher scores. And I don't know if that's sometimes they're feeling, well, this is about me, and therefore I am giving a slightly increased score because it's my school, or I haven't got any evidence for that. But actually, when we've done surveys away from the school, senior leaders tend to score lower than they do in their own kind of school survey.
All right, so what else can you tell us?
So the other thing to notice, as I said earlier, you'll notice here, for instance, this score of 279 is higher than this score of 358 or this score of 371 in terms of its comparative performance. So again, this score of 3.8, I should say, is higher than here. And this score of 305 is higher than this 254. So that's just an example of trying to show that all scores aren't equal, because actually what's really interesting is it's the comparative score, because you might score lower in some areas but still be higher performing in that area than one other. So without those benchmarks, you can end up wasting energy and effort in areas where you think you're a lower scorer, but actually you aren't, or you might ignore areas where there's real headroom for growth, but actually your score feels like it's better. So
I'm going to interrupt you. I'm conscious. I'm seeing some comments through the chat box. I'm going to put 1 or 2 questions on the screen in a moment, but I know what this can do. So can you just work through some of the tabs on the left and just give people a little
just going to do that. So
demo behind the scenes?
Yeah. So once you've looked at the dashboard, the main thing to really start with is the report. And this came, as I said, because most people don't want to just have data, although for those that want data, there's plenty of it. So what we've tried to do is summarise. Sorry, that's me jumped out. So we've summarised in a report, and I'll come on to filters in a minute. What we're trying to do, this standard. So this is demands. We're looking at the comparative strengths and areas for possible review against the school and the organisational benchmarks. And you can see in this, there is no strength compared to the HESE benchmark. But the most important thing is we then recommend actions, and also we recommend who those actions are aimed at, because the most important thing happens after the survey. So I'll come back to these actions in a minute, because I think that's what people might be interested in. So, and we'll have a look at the demands, and we'll have a look at the actions for support and also for change when we come back through. So up to 21 actions can be generated from there. And obviously that's about saving people time. And because we target who that's with, and we do that through heat maps. And so what heat maps do is allow you to see the actual score. So you can see here a sweeping red. They don't always look like that in schools, but we can see the all staff score. But we can also see the difference between teaching staff and middle and senior leaders. And you can see here, and probably in order, if I was saying this, it's probably middle leaders generally are the lowest scorers, followed by teaching staff.
So does this essentially give me a kind of traffic light kind of signpost where to focus energy?
It would. Obviously, the challenge in this one is because we have got so many low scores, which isn't as typical as this.
Right, so it's
less of a traffic light and more of a
firefighting exercise at the moment.
But we'll come back to that, because the most important thing is, one of the challenges we have, because we do a results review call with schools, and so one of my challenges also to say, look, you share the results with the school, and there might be some actions for senior leaders, but actually the main thing is to share with staff and to make them part of the solution, and because otherwise all that happens is we put more pressure on ourselves as senior leaders to come up with all the answers. Whereas actually what we want to do is saying, look, this is your feedback. This is an area clear of focus. What should we do about it? What are one or two things? And really encouraging schools to prioritize and be cyclical and think about what's the things that are going to have the highest impact for the lowest effort or are the most important, and kind of build over time. And also don't forget to remind people of things you have implemented, because that's, again, a mistake I've seen lots of leaders admitting to me when I talk to them make. They kind of implement things and then forget about them, and staff have got very short memories because there's more pressure coming. So if you do a feedback exercise, if you do implement things, make sure you remind staff, and not in an ungracious way, but just saying, look, you said, we did, now it's time again, and kind of make it part of that cycle. So as well as time at school, we can see there's very little difference between full and part-time people, which actually is something generally we see. There are some differences, and you can see in this group, with the exception of control, from those people that are filled in, and we know there's at least 5 people in every group, because for anonymity it would not display filters, and that's why you haven't got all the filters here. For instance, you haven't got support staff or anything. But it's quite interesting here. It doesn't seem to matter for you that are filled in the survey what period of your career you're in. Clearly, there are challenges whether or not there is anything there.
Mark, I've got a question here from Eve. Would this work for a very small school with no SLT? So just the head teacher and teaching and support staff?
So yes, and I'm just saying that. So we are probably smallest school ever was part of a MAT with 9 staff. We've done a few with 12 and 14. Clearly the filters wouldn't deploy, but you'd be looking at the total. Generally the filters may not deploy. You might get one for teachers if you've got 5 and they all take it. But generally it would still give you a report, and it would still give staff the opportunity to give feedback, and particularly to give those comments clearly and being open. Obviously, one of the fears of small schools obviously is around anonymity, the fact that in a smaller group, but there is no way unless this school is like 3 people, in which case it becomes very difficult. But if you're at 8, 9, 10 or more level, then there's no way that scores or comments can be identified unless in the comments people identify themselves. Sure. So anonymity is really important, and I think it shocks people actually, the power of the comments sometimes, because although you've given some quite I guess, feedback that cuts through to it, and actually is quite difficult to read sometimes about the challenges that some people are facing. Everybody's been quite polite in their comments and feedback generally. I think, without exception, sometimes even in good schools, you will read some quite challenging. Yeah. So one of the things we always say, and they're not used to it sometimes because they've done their Google Forms one, they've done their Survey Monkey one, but because the school have been running it, they don't realise that people actually have been holding back. So from that point of view, you have to be prepared to have thick skin if you're going to run a survey like this.
Absolutely. I'll put your slide back up in a second, Mark. So we're halfway through the session, folks. Comments in the chat box. We have got a few slides that will show right at the end, and some QR codes and a discount code and a little trial. And we also want to briefly talk, probably towards 8 o'clock, so in about 30 minutes time, potentially how we can take this further with the current group that have taken part, and show you what we can do with this a bit more, and potentially just conduct our own little wellbeing research project. But let's see. Mark, show us a few more key features. Let's spend another 10 minutes or so on that, and then we shall move forward.
So although, as I said, just come back to report, the idea of the report, and we're actually just adding some things that will make it even easier. So for those that don't want to move from the report, they'll be able to see what to do and who to do it with, and make choices and prioritize. But if you do love data, you can jump back into the dashboard. And if I look at demands, for instance, you can have a look at heat maps for every question that's in the survey. You can look at who's taken the survey, the numbers. You can look at the scores, as you can see, for each question, how they're benchmarked. So it kind of meets those people who really want to get in, but also for those people who don't want to do any analysis, it's largely done for you. The other thing then is you've got staff comments, and what you can see here is staff comments. What I'm just going to do quickly is I'm going to jump, because we ran this survey slightly different to you would do in a school. The only setup thing for a school is to upload your staff records, because we then do all the survey management and invitations for you, rather than just sending out a link as we did, and each staff member will get their own link. It also means we can follow up. So you probably have done surveys where people get annoyed because you keep asking them and they've done it. So what you can do here, you'll see just the difference here, as well as doing all the keywords. When you run your own school survey, the other thing you can do is actually respond to staff. So this is quite interesting and important. So while the survey is open, you can engage with people and thank them for taking part. You can, obviously, when people give some feedback, perhaps it's less helpful, like, communication from NSLT is not very good, you can ask them why. And if you do get some more challenging feedback on, say, bullying, harassment, inclusivity, that kind of thing, you've now got a methodology to go back. I should say, people will see who's responding from the dashboard. So your name, the account holder's name, or anybody else, because it's a multi-account access, will be seen, but you will not know who you're writing to. And if they choose to respond, you will not know who that is either. So it allows you to keep going and actually support people through an anonymous way going forward. While I'm on here as well, because you won't get this, so you'll just see a little difference of the dashboard. So obviously, when you run a year 2 survey, and this is a real primary school, so you can see the scores are a little bit higher and more balanced. Clearly, we're tracking progress up to 5 surveys, and there's also things like analytics, which will allow you to track as well. And so this is teaching staff in the classroom and support staff, so you'll be able to see. So in terms of tracking impact of things you're doing, in terms of seeing what's happening as a result of your actions, we're trying to make it as easy as we can in terms of you being able to see that. So let me just go back to this one, as it's a teacher toolkit school. The other thing that you've got is a presentation. Because the one mistake that sometimes people make is, if you do a survey, you have to feed back to staff, particularly at least at headline level. And ideally, you want to engage them in those solutions so that they buy into them and the suggestions come from them to reduce it. So, and not just, you might want to do it to stakeholders like your governors, trustees, others as well. So by having a downloadable PowerPoint where you can see the scores, and you can quickly edit and share the things you want.
Workload and Wellbeing, Mark. This is a click of a button type feature that's easy to do, and it gives you the headlines.
Yeah, so so basically, once you've uploaded your staff records, everything really. So opening the survey is a click. We manage all the survey automatically. If after our 3 automated sends you want to do more because participation's not running, then you would there is a place in the survey where you can send additional invitations to 1 staff member or more, but again, all click of a button. When you shut the survey, all this appears, so you don't have to do anything. It's all there. Ruth,
here's a question from Ruth, Mark. How many times would you recommend running a survey?
Well, because this is such a deep dive and it gives you such recommendations, most of our schools, and our schools range from small primaries to schools like Wellington, Millfield, Tonbridge, some of the big ones too. I'm trying to think of its name, Ashfield, which is the biggest single site secondary school in the country. We've got quite a number of special schools, SEND schools. So we've got a real range. We've obviously got maths because there's a math dashboard with this.
So what's the average of those schools, Mark?
So I was going to say, so most of them will run it once or twice a year. And I know people want to do it more often. So we have this second thing called Welby Voice, which allows you to have conversations throughout the year, which is a bit more like an email, anonymous email with groups of 8 staff, follow-up survey actions, built at the feedback of our schools when COVID came along to say, we don't do these big surveys. Can we have an informal kind of way of doing it? Now, clearly, probably the most popular type of survey out there is pulse surveys. And nothing wrong with pulse surveys. Great for leaders wanting to check the temperature. I think one of the challenges for schools and indeed some corporates where I came from with pulse surveys, though, is you have to be able to act on them. Because whilst it's nice for leaders to keep asking the same questions, and I know it's every 2 weeks sometimes or more, if they don't see you doing anything, that enthusiasm for giving feedback can quickly dissipate. So for us, we're trying to do a piece that allows schools to actually take some significant action and then follow up 6 months, and in some cases a year later, but to move it. So it's not.
So I guess, with that point, if you did take action and you had a proactive leadership and staff, you could run a survey once every half term if you felt.
Well, I think you could, particularly with our premium product that's got you can run as many as you want, but I think you will find, just from my experience now, we're in nearly 350 schools.
Same stuff.
In the 2, I think most schools. I'll give an example. I'm sure Wellington won't mind me talking. They came on saying we're going to do this every term, and I was saying, well, you might not. They've got 700 odd staff. It took them a while to get all their filters lined up because we also have the ability. And I think they've now settled back to say it's probably a couple of times a year because they get such detailed feedback. Then you've got that, share it with staff and action it. I think the key point is not if you want to tick in the box, this is not it. This is about taking proactive action where we're helping you to more quickly figure out what to do and who to do it with. So if I just quickly go back to here, because this one's got what am I looking at? So heat maps. So this is an example of additional filters, and you can add whatever you want in here. So I've noticed, so these are fairly recent developments, but as an example, it's too early to say, but I've noticed in a small number of surveys, for instance, where in secondary schools where they've done it by department, I've noticed pretty much in all of them so far, people teaching maths are significantly scoring more highly than people teaching English, as an example. Now, I can't report that as a national trend yet because it is like a handful of schools.
Highly in what, Mark, to be specific?
Sorry, say again?
Highly in what regard?
No, just their scores are much higher across the board.
Right.
So this will allow you, we've only got 3 examples here, but you can get down to jobs, to departments, even line manager. We've got people doing it if it's done well. And the whole purpose of this is to target action, to reduce your workload. So even though I've just made the sweeping comment that teachers generally tend to have lower scores, actually we're seeing with filters, it's not all teachers. Some departments in schools actually are highly performing. So you can find out, well, what are they doing? But also make sure you focus in on those areas that will bring the biggest impact, as I said, as well as that celebration, because sometimes we don't talk about.
Mark, I'm going to interject again. Apologies. I'm keeping an eye on the time. So just a reminder for people watching, pose your comments on your platform. I'll get a comment on my side. I'll put it on the screen on your behalf. We've got 1 or 2 slides. Maybe, Mark, you just want to reference the DFE charter. We can come back to the survey in the next, or the screen if you want to, in the next 10 minutes or so.
Yeah, I think unless people got questions on this, clearly if people want a demo, we can kind of go into detail and look at things. But I think I've kind of given an under the hood look at what's there. As I said, the aim is really to help people more quickly move to action after the survey.
We pop over to the why a little bit, Mark, and maybe you come to this bit and maybe explain.
So it was interesting because you talked about sausage rolls, and I saw in the comments there were some comments about some of these more, I guess, tokenistic. People often use the word, or things which I can understand why people do them, because actually they're easy. It's much easier to just put on an activity day, or to book some yoga at a night, or to put cakes on. Now, don't get me wrong, there is nothing wrong with doing some of those things. Sometimes having a treat is nice. However, if they're not as well as, and particularly after, things that you've done, what you'll see is it's a bit like building a house. You know, if you don't get those foundations first, so if you just move, if you click to move on, the foundations will move. Well, I don't know if that builds yet. So, you know, it's really about building. It's really about building those leadership behaviors and systems of support, because actually people want to feel supported. They want to feel appreciated when they come in, but where people tend to focus is more on that value added and personal support, because it's much easier. So a lot of MATs are doing brilliantly in building out some fantastic perks, insurances, travel perks, all sorts of things. And that's great. And I don't want to stop those. But if people still are coming in not feeling, you know, like actually they're listened to, they've got too much to do, then actually those other things will not generally stop them either burning out or leaving the profession or protect for retention. So they need to be as well as. So we can't really start in the roof and work down. We really need to start in the bottom and work up. And that's, so all our focus is on that. And if I come back to the actions, just here, I'll just share one. I won't share it on the screen. It's fine. I can just talk through it. But you know, one action for leaders, you'll see it. One of the questions in the survey is, my line manager encourages me at work. Almost without exception, every school that we've ever done, including those that have scored in the top 10%, when compared to the HSE decile, are in the 10th decile. And what this is, I think, from our research and talking, and most school leaders, I go, yeah, you're right, is that shout outs and praise in schools tend to be much more staged defense. Their emails, their thanks, their shout outs, they're the staff member of the week, they're the kind of bits. Whereas in lots of organizations where I came from in the back, and in fact, when I was 23, graduate training with Halifax, I went on this wonderful course with a snappy title, and I'm going back 35 years, so I just show my age, and it was called Managing by Walking About. So I was actually taught how to go and find people and authentically praise them, and not to go on the same route, and how to be visible and all this. And that's been invaluable my whole life. And yet things like that aren't taught. So the biggest probably win for well-being in staff is for senior leaders to really catch people doing things right in the moment, in the same way as they did when they were a teacher for their students. But the problem is years of not being able to do that. And there are really good reasons for that. Everybody's in classrooms, not in an open plan office. Everybody's in...
I've put this graphic on here that I like, that you've got on your slides, you know, getting teachers to go to school. And obviously we might want to just quickly reference the DFE Wellbeing charter. But yeah, it's a great bit of CPD, that walking around.
Absolutely.
Not everyone gets it right.
Well, it's hard if you haven't been taught how to give authentic. You know, I still run a number of workshops because I enjoy it, and the number of people who come up to me or talk to me on results review. You know, as David's just said, very little management. Some of it is because they don't understand how to do it, and they also don't understand how to plan it, because it doesn't have to take up as much time as people think. If you plan your visibility as well as not being visible, you probably only need to do it a few minutes each day and be in different places for people to see you and to be visible. But it does take effort and time. And I meet a lot of people just saying that actually, when you talk about praise, they don't know what to say. Or I still meet people go, well, we paid them to come to work. Why should they need me to kind of praise them? They should just do their job. And yet there's so much evidence of the benefits. In fact, one Japanese study suggested it was better than a pay rise. And given we haven't had many of those over the last few years, I take every win I can get. And we have had schools focus just on that and build up. And you're right, David, it is highly individualized, as you say, but I think to make it part of the culture, it's something that leadership teams can build into their approach, not to get people to come every 3 weeks, say, as part of a standing agenda item to say, which people did you praise in the last 2 weeks, but to have a psychologically safe environment where people can go, I'm really struggling to do this, I keep forgetting.
I guess it goes back to that, like you said, you had that training, school leaders do need training in specific leadership type things. It's often the great teacher.
And the time to be able to do it. So let's clearly...
So, Mark, I'm conscious there's a few people watching from other countries. They maybe have a British curriculum, they may not. But just for context, this is the Department for Education in England's staff wellbeing charter, so teaching and support staff. It was published last academic year. And and you highlight these three. So tell us why you choose these three as you think.
So welcome for everybody around the world. And I did spot someone from the US. And if you're interested, get in touch because we're about to pilot out there. So just to get that in as well. I picked out these three because really, I guess number 11, you go, well, Mark, of course you're going to say that because you run a measurement and improvement company. And I'm going, yes, but actually, if you think about it, and not just in the charter, if you want to know where you are now, so you can make the best decisions, surely, you do it for your children, you do internal tests, you do the bits to know their starting position, you have teacher assessments, etc. And clearly you can do your own assessments on wellbeing in terms of the retention stats, the staff absence stats, the grievance stats, do exit and stay interviews and things like that, and pull that information in, and then add something like this, and also to be able to track it so that not only do you know where you're going and how well you're doing in getting there, but also you can look back on, which of the things that I did seems to have had an impact. Because although we're talking about this, as you said earlier, any decisions taken in school will be captured in such a report that covers culture, that covers these kind of management standards. So really anything you're doing. And then the second two I've done is, and somebody said it earlier, I think you did around protect. I think it might be in the comments I'm reading, about this importance of protecting leader wellbeing, and quite extraordinarily called a sub-strategy, where it should probably be called the top strategy. But ultimately, it's that old cliched piece around the airline, isn't it? And the oxygen mask, and the fact that they don't announce, put on everybody else's mask till you pass out. But often school leaders are doing that. There are a number of schools I've come across where many of the senior team are covering duties just so other people can have a break and they don't take one. Well, things like that, I understand the necessity, but eventually they're not sustainable. So it's really thinking of what are some of these long-term solutions. And I know there's no silver bullet and it's hard, and particularly when Omicron has been going on.
Why have you highlighted number 11?
So number 11 is the one I started with, which is the measuring. So the starting point. And then 10 and 3 are about leaders. And then I would move on to 2. But a lot of people start on 2. But the challenge is you're then always firefighting, because if the leaders aren't in the position to look after themselves and don't have the skills to support others, you're constantly coming back to it. So whilst I'm not saying things like number 2 aren't important, clearly getting 3 and 10 right first is, and other things like prioritizing staff mental health and talking about it and establishing a clear communication policy will all come out of, I think, in my view, number 3. If you give staff the right tools, they will communicate effectively, they will give staff a voice.
So you got this nice slide. If I just rewind it back to the start, and we kind of
it only animates.
Oh, does it? Okay. So there you go. So, that strategy, talk us through,
that's exactly what we've just been talking about. The starting point is measure. So whether you use us, and if you do your own survey, better than nothing. And if anybody's still not convinced of the ease, but is doing their own, hey, still get in touch, because we have a checklist for running your own survey, the 14 steps needed, because we genuinely want to make a difference in schools, not not just with us, but with everybody. But you have to measure and understand where you are now, ideally benchmarking it. You've then got to set some goals, which is often what people miss. People often go straight to plan without going, well, what does good look like and how do I get there? They then obviously, once they've got the plan and put it in the school development plan, need to actually implement, but also embed it. One of the challenges often in schools is we're doing so many things that we move on from something before it's embedded and we're on to the next thing. So it's actually saying, well, how do I embed that? And that's how you can use Welby Voice to really follow up, as well as one-to-ones and meetings and things like that. And then obviously once you're confident there, saying, well, now we have to just keep repeating. And each 6 months or each 12 months, we've got to keep.
I do wonder, as you're talking, Mark, that how far away are we from, I say cautiously, league tables and things like that. But if we look at pupil outcomes in comparison to pupil well-being and teacher and support staff well-being, and connect all those 3 dots, that would be quite a powerful piece of data, wouldn't it, in terms of reporting across the country, that whether you're happy or whatever else leads to better outcomes and what have you, that'd be quite a radical overhaul of what we currently report.
Yeah, and I think the day we have league tables for well-being is probably the day we all need to give up. But
yes,
as it defeats the whole piece. But I think, and so the bit you talked about earlier, if schools are interested in this and they come in under the teacher toolkit quote and banner, one of the things I'd be really interested in is seeing if you'd want to hook up with each other, because we can also offer an internal benchmark outside hours where schools together can actually see how they compare with each other, and we could also connect, so we could have an ongoing conversation about action.
So we posed at the start of the session, everyone watching or people joining later, that so just for context, a quick recap of where we've been. So I sent this survey out to all ticket holders, so 130 of you. Half of you, thankfully, went through the 30 plus questions. We've gathered this pretend bit of data, although it's real in your context, but we're in a pretend teacher toolkit school. And Mark's gone through the dashboard here and kind of given you a snapshot of what the data tells us and the recommendations. I guess the proposal is, what could we do together as a little community to kind of maybe take this a little bit further, for you to kind of trial it a little bit deeper? So either comments in the chat box, or you can reply to me through the Eventbrite link, or leave a comment on the YouTube video once I end the broadcast. But just let us know what you think, really, because there's a lot of potential for this. And as Mark can just probably just give us a quick reminder, there's a large number of schools already doing wellbeing kind of bits of data. Mark, how many schools are using your product now?
We're just about to 350, but if you think we only really launched 2 months before COVID, we got 100 in the first 3 months, and then COVID kind of got in the way. But we're really pleased with seeing the pickup now.
You're still surviving yourself, so that's credit to you. So, is there anything else we can show? If I just pop back to the slides, Mark, we've got.
I think we can give the offer in a minute. But as I said, the bit you just talked about in terms of so that's just showing some of the things I've shown you. But some of the things we said, if people were interested, capturing some of the other data you just said from them and sharing that as well, but also sharing what's working in some schools with others, and connecting people up into a kind of teacher toolkit wellbeing community, staff wellbeing community. Because the other thing is, we are generally as a country focus more on student well-being, and even when I have conversations with people, they often start and end up on students.
I guess the things you see behind the scenes, you get the snapshot of all the schools, but you're blogging and sharing resources and all the insights from all the school well-being data you gather. So
you can see that on you can see it on our learning centre. But what schools don't do, because they haven't got the time, is necessary. We haven't got a channel where we can create that community of talking to each other. So Ross and I was just saying, well, maybe we can start something as we're working together on this, that would kind of help people see things. So if you just put that one up. So we're already not particularly all right. So I did a new slide, Ross. So don't worry, I'll describe it. I didn't send it yet. Sorry, I was thinking I would share it.
Got the wrong slide up, folks.
No. The top bit's fine, but actually the offer for premium is even better, because what we've decided is you can have the premium for the pro price. So the premium will still be 247 to 647. So if you want to take the bigger one, which gives you the filters and your ability to add your own questions, which we haven't looked at without compromising it. We'll do that at the same low price. So the most you'll pay is 647, and that's if you're a school of up to between 1,500 and 2,500 pupils, and the 247 is for 200 and less. So we want to get more people on board. We deliberately priced it. Some of the biggest schools tell us they can't believe we're so cheap, and I know, but we built this.
I can't say on your, I see a lot of ed tech software in my life as a teacher blogger, and you are brilliant value for money. In the bottom of the screen, folks, there is a kind of web link there. If you want to have a look, I will circulate this through all the alerts and ticket links and things with the video and the slides and the QR code, so you can read all the feedback from all of us, and then we'll probably be in touch with you with a potential refined idea of how we might take this a little further without adding too much to your workload, but just maybe as giving you a bit more of an insight into what the data can tell us as a kind of a case study group, and see where it goes from there. Mark, you've got lots of bullet points there for people to have a look through. If I put you in the corner and you tell me your number one benefit, what would it be?
That we make it easier for schools to improve staff wellbeing, because it's what happens after that's important, by recommending actions based on their scores and by showing them who they should be using those actions with. I think that's our number one benefit. I think some of the other fix are just hygiene and comfort benefits, like it's a recognised standard, it's independently evaluated, it's DFE charter recognised, and it's a really good fit with the Ofsted Leadership Management Judgment. Now, for some senior leaders, things like that might be more important, and it is a benefit. But for me, actually, the real thing is we help more schools improve their wellbeing. I haven't redone it. Last time we did it, which was a couple of months back, 85% of schools had got higher scores in their second survey than their first one, and we have a very high renewal rate. So from our point of view, we know we do a lot of things right, and our challenge, like everybody's at the moment, is how do we help people find out and get on board with us and kind of try us out, which is why we have the money back guarantee. It's very difficult to trial this, because the only way you get the real benefit is to run a survey. And so doing a free trial with 3 people or a tiny bit, you really need the whole school, and you've got to go all in, because I need to engage them.
I guess we've had a good sample here, haven't we? So let me just put this on the screen one last time, folks. So here is a QR code. So if you've got a phone to hand, and hopefully you're watching this on a desktop, you can grab your phone, QR this. If not, I'll circulate it anyway, so don't worry. But you'll get the people that participated in our survey, all their anonymized wellbeing comments. There's some interesting things in here. And as what Mark has done behind the scenes to prepare us for this, he's put it all into a pretend teacher talk at school. And we've kind of showed you the kind of insights from this data in some of the tabs on the left-hand side. I guess I'll start to wrap things up, but I'll conclude with what I said at the start and what I'll keep saying. I was very nervous about tracking teacher wellbeing a decade ago, but I would not hesitate today. And this is something I would highly advocate to all schools, particularly in challenging teaching's challenging, full stop, different contexts, different circumstances. But if you're here in England watching, you'll know just as much as I do that we're working in a very high stakes accountability system. And with reduced budgets and increasing teacher mental health and workload, it's in everybody's interest to take teacher well-being and support staff well-being a lot more seriously, particularly if we want to keep our staff in our schools. Mark, any concluding comments? I'm going to just go through the comments from everyone else, but if you,
I mean, just to say, for those small number of people, but you're not unimportant, that are here from other 16 countries. Sadly, particularly English-speaking ones, but also some of the others, teachers over there, the US, Australia, other places, are suffering very similarly to here. It's not good to say that. To say, look, we're not an exception. It's a kind of global challenge, and I think coming back to your bit at the beginning, where you talked about people are seen as it's a short day and a holidays. the biggest challenge, I think, having done some, I do a lot of adult training, and having done some work on character education, it's that sheer intensity all day that, that I think most people who have never taught don't really understand. So being able to have regular breaks, to be able to switch tasks, to be able to switch off, are things we need to build in. And of course, exactly the opposite has been happening. Even before Omicron, we were reducing break times, we were cramming more in, and clearly that's made it the last 2 years even worse. So really, how we can help leaders understand those foundational things, and how we can help them, and even things like efficient working. There are loads of things that people can do to work more smartly. And sometimes we also just have to realize that you won't get everything done, so quit trying. So we have to just say, look, we're not going to get all done, and we've got to be comfortable with that.
And like you said, go back to that training you had when you were a young man. You can start to see there's certain things that have to be taught in your leadership life. I'll just finish with, I guess, what I said on the ticket link. You cannot improve teacher well-being if you're guessing in the dark. You can't rest on your laurels or go on a hunch. I think having this hard data, and if you choose to do X in terms of a school leadership policy decision and it impacts on everyone else, those well-being surveys and bits of data can allow you to see the impact. And I'm confident what Mark shared tonight shows you how you can do that. So yes, and you've heard from Mark himself, you can do your Google surveys yourself. But I think with Welby is quite a good valuable tool. And as a new company, it's time to get in touch with Mark, I think. So I'm still working with Mark over the next couple of months, digging into his software, trying to critique it, trying to see how we can develop it a little bit further. But we'll probably do a couple more of these in the next month or so. And we'll also be in touch with this current group in this session and talk to you about how we might do a small little case study if you're interested. But Mark, thank you very much.
No, and thank you. And if you didn't register, but you're on those live things, do reach out to the various things. And just a huge thank you for spending an hour of your valuable time, and in fact a little bit more than an hour of your valuable time, because we know spending time is not trivial, particularly after the day you've probably had today. So I'm humbled that you took time out, and I hope we've given some value. On our learning centre there are other things, but again, whether you buy or not, we're always open to give advice, always happy to have conversations with people who've got well-being challenges, and just to share things that have worked in the hundreds of schools we've worked with. So feel free to get in touch, even if it's just to have a chat. You've probably got over today. The one thing that I am is passionate, so I'll never turn down the opportunity to talk about well-being with anybody, whether they're customers or not. So please.
So there you go. All the thank yous are coming in, Mark, already. I've just put a few on.
Thank you very much. Thanks, David.
So we're going to disappear. Thank you for joining us. I'll circulate the video, the slides with you all through Eventbrite, and you can already grab this video on YouTube anyway. As for Mark and I, thank you for joining us, and we shall be in touch. Bye for now. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Ross. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye, everyone.